do that, let me know. Happy to walk you through it. So with that, tonight, Denise Silva. Denise's interest in photography started when she was young, and her grandmother would share her images from her travels to Egypt and Africa for safari. The evenings watching slideshows set the seed, and 35 years later, those seeds took root and inspired Denise to embrace photography. More specifically, travel photography, and Roadrunner Photography Tours was born. Denise has been recognized as one of the top 200 women photographers who inspire by Nature Photo Guides, and has had multiple articles published in Extraordinary Vision magazine, and is a featured artist in Breakthrough Photography's Guide to Night Sky Photography. Her passion is to share her knowledge of photography while introducing people to the amazing landscapes, wildlife, and people all over the world. And tonight, Denise Silva.
Thank you, Denise.
Wow, I feel like there needs to be a drum roll with that ending. Hello, everybody. All right, I will share my screen. Oh, good Lord. Maybe I won't share my screen. It's making me provide access. A minute.
Sure.
So it wants me now to quit and reopen. So I think if that's the truth, you're gonna have to let me back in, Sam. Got it?
Okay. Yep.
I'm gonna reassign you. Let's see, that's the host.
Okay. The top.
Okay. No, I know, but I had to stop sharing to do it. It's a nightmare. You wouldn't think I spend literally like all day in Zoom. Okay. Okay. Can you now see my screen?
Yes.
All righty. Let me go plug the phone in so it doesn't die, because that's why it wasn't in my hand. Okay. We should be good now. So I decided to add Greenland to this because they're all kind of in the same place of the world. And so there's a third section to this. It's not going to just be Alaska and Iceland. But just to get a sense of 66 North, you can sort of see where the Arctic Circle is and where these places land in this little screenshot here. And so there's obviously lots up here. We could be in Sweden and Finland, and maybe someday I'll be able to add those. But for now, we're going to hit Greenland and Iceland and Alaska, which is at the top left. So we'll start off in Alaska. And this is going to be like when Sam and I started talking about this, we talked about, you know, do we want to make it super educational? Do we want a bunch of pretty pictures? And Sam voted for pretty pictures. So really, this is going to be a tour of these locations and some of the sites we see when we've gone on our you know, workshops in these areas. So I will preface it with that. If you have any questions or whatever, or want me to stop or talk about something, feel free to like interrupt. John, I can't see the chat, so if you can monitor that, that would be helpful. And in case anybody types a question. And I think that's about it. And there's tons of slides, so and a couple videos, so we're gonna try to tackle it pretty quickly. So it's the largest state in the United States, and it is our most northern and most western state. It is comprises a total landmass that's greater than the 3 largest states together, and our 3 largest states are Canada. Just saying, California, Texas, and Montana.
Hey.
What was that? He said, "Hey." Hey, okay. So I like to acknowledge that Montana is the 4th largest landmass, and we have 1 million people. So to put that in perspective, Loudoun County has more than 1 million people. So it is the 3rd least populated state with, and I thought this was really interesting because the population in 2019 was 731,000, but in 2015 it was actually 737,000. So that's like a pretty good 6,000 people have either died or left. So I just thought that was like a really interesting stat that the state is getting less and less populated. It's generally located mostly north of the 60th, so 60 degrees or 60th parallel. Half the population of that state actually lives within Anchorage metropolitan area. So a little bit like Iceland. So what I want you guys to think about, even as you see photos, are really the similarities. You know, you can kind of, when you've been to enough of these places, you start to see how all these land masses were probably connected at some point millions and millions of years ago, because they are so similar in their character. And in this case, that's very similar, although it's more like 75% of the population lives within Reykjavik. So I think that's pretty interesting, that most of these areas, as big as they are really sparsely populated. And it has one of the smallest economies in the country, and yet it is got one of the highest per capita incomes. So per person, the income is pretty high. I don't know if that is because they include the supplemental income that the state provides. If you live there, you get an additional like refund from the state for having just stayed in the state. So I don't know if that's part of that income per capita, but it's interesting that they have a fairly high, you know, income and living. The interesting thing about that is their economy is dominated mostly by three industries, which is fishing, natural gas, and oil. So these first set of photos is really just on the road. When Jeff and I went, we drove everywhere, and there's probably 20 roads total in the entire state. So it makes it pretty easy. But we started in Anchorage, went down to Homer, and then up to Denali, out to Seward, which is where the Kenai Peninsula is. And that's pretty much the bulk of the roads with some minor offshoots. And so this is just some stuff that's taken along the way. So again, going to blow through the photos pretty quick. I think this is actually on the train up to Denali, from the train. This is up near Denali, little moose, lots of eagles, lots of moose actually there. This is Independence Mine, which is on sort of a back pass that goes from Anchorage to Wasilla, basically. Actually, Talkeetna, maybe. Just man, I can hear Jeff talking. It's like he might as well be in the room with me. He's upstairs judging. Anyway, so we got lucky. We went to a state park and saw this way out in the distance. So this is not going to be your like most epic shot, but we're like, what in the hell is that crossing the water? And it was a moose and her calf, and they crossed the entire lake, which is pretty dramatic. As you didn't get a sense of the size of the calf until this scene, but the lake was quite large, and they just cruised right through it, which is pretty amazing. As desolate and as remote as it is, and as cold as it is most of the year, it is also a lovely place for wildflowers. So there's all kinds of life for those few short periods when the weather is permissible for that. So as next step, it's going to just be from Denali. Denali is really quite lovely. Now, the road that you see here is, there's one road in and out. It goes 90 miles. And 9 times out of 10, to appreciate this road, you're actually in what I would classify quite generously as a prison bus. It is a hard bench, you know, like an inch thick cushion, and you're in it for like 12 to 16 hours. It's like ridiculously long and painful, but it's kind of one of those must-dos to tick off. And this is just part of the road. So this is just a turnout that we stopped at, and you get this beautiful vista. Most people, or like, I guess it's maybe the way to better put it, is 15% of the people who visit the park see Denali. That means 85% of the people who see the park, go to the park to see Denali, never do, because it's creating its own weather. So you can see by some of our photos that we got very lucky and saw it every day that we were in the park. Mountain grizzly here with her cubs, just some cubs. Now I found viewing for grizzly here actually really difficult. At least for us, they were little dots. That's why these are just rubbish photos for the animals. Little dots on the mountain. And it isn't like, for me, it wouldn't be the place I would go to look for bears. I would go to Katmai, which you'll see in a little bit. Again, just another sort of traditional overlook scene that they will stop at, so you can get this vista. Trying to do some details. And then the rest of the valley and mountains are just extraordinary. So beyond Denali and what you might see of Denali, just everything about being in the park is really majestic. And when you look at this scene, you'll see some photos that are very similar to this, again, with landscape and Iceland. So it's, to me, I think over time, that was the thing that I found most remarkable, was just how similar the landscapes are. Kenai Peninsula, so if you don't want to do the land mammals, but you want to actually go and be on the water and see glaciers and whatnot, Kenai is the place to go for that. And this is just some of the halibut caught in Seward. That was the day's catch. And most of these are all taken from a boat. You're on a ferry, basically, that'll take you to all these scenes. Now, one of my favorite animals for the water are the otters. And this is my see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. Glaciers, so there are glaciers. Some of them you can get to by hike. Some of them you do get to by the boat. And for glacial loss, Alaska is probably one of the most profoundly affected by warming and cycle change. And so the glaciers here have really receded. And there's one glacier, Jim, you might know the name. I want to say it starts with an E, where as you drive up to where you would like park and get out to go see the glacier, they show signs along the way. And the signs represent where the glacier was on that year. And it's remarkable from the first sign to like the current sign, how much, I mean, it's miles worth of distance that the glacier is receded. So it is one place that it's most notable. Iceland, on the other hand, there has been some glacial change there, but what we learned on our last trip there was many of the glaciers in Iceland are static, like they're not changing. They're not growing, but they're not shrinking. Although I would say that we noticed quite a bit of difference when we went to do some ice caving, which you'll see some pictures of. From the first time we went to the cave to the next time we went to basically the same location, the hike was about 2 miles further across the rock. So there is definitely change. And this is an ice fall, so just the calving of one of the glaciers. Some puffins, just some seals. Now, these were awesome. I love orca. They're my favorite whale. We did not see any of the bubble feeding. Like I know some other people, I've seen some photos of it. It's really amazing. Obviously not this animal from the humpback of the bubble feeding, which would have been awesome. I just wasn't there at the right time of year for that. This crazy little fellow was literally on the side of a cliff. It's really quite amazing to see where these animals get themselves stuck. Got to assume that they're going to be okay. In Iceland, on the flip side, their sheep get out on these cliffs, like similar cliffs, and they actually have a rescue squad for sheep that they will go out and rappel down and rescue the animals, because once they get down there, unlike these mountain goats, they're not capable of figuring out how to get out of it. Seward I dug, they had a shipyard, so we spent a lot of time there. And when I took this shot, it's actually an iPhone shot, and I didn't really think about it. I mean, it looks really big and awesome, and but it's hard to tell for scale. And then when I finally went and processed it on my phone, I noticed that there was a full-size fishing trawler in the bottom left corner. So that'll give you just a scale, some idea of the scale and massiveness of this huge, probably whaling ship, I would be my guess, but it could just be a tanker. So Land's End is Homer. So basically due south. So Seward is east of Anchorage. And you pass kind of through a tunnel to kind of get out to that side of the area. This is south of that. So this is really considered the end of the spit, basically, of when you see Alaska and it turns and it comes out that long, thin thing. Outside the island masses, this is down that way. A lot of abandoned stuff, tons of eagles. So if you're into eagles and you want to shoot that, you know, and not go to Conowingo, there's a lot of places to see eagle activity within Alaska. The Chilkat is one. This is a river on the way down to Homer, and then Homer has a set of eagles as well. When we were there and we sat on this beach, we had eagles, 30, 40 feet from us hanging about. They're pretty comfortable, and they hang out there during the fishing season because the fishermen who take the steaks from the fish throw the carcasses back into the ocean and only keep the meat. And so these guys are, fishing that out of the ocean. So they're around and they're comfortable around people. So you can get pretty good access to the animal. Lots of abandoned fishing boats. We were there in June, July. So Katmai National Park, this is basically west of Anchorage. You basically fly in. It is one of the more remote national parks that we have, and the only access to this is through plane, and you land, you take a seaplane and land on the water, and then that puts you into the park, and then you can either camp there, or stay in the lodge, or and then hike about. So this is basically what it looks like when you're on a seaplane, and the scenery going in is remarkable. If nothing else but for the flight, I would say this is more than worthwhile, even if you weren't into bears. This is a beautiful place. Here, when you're in Katmai, you are sharing the land with the bears. So the park, all the trails in the park that you're going to walk on are actually paths that the bears use. So you will come into contact. And sometimes you're really close. Sometimes you have to step off because the bear has basically the right of way. When you get out to the platforms, you might be 30 to 50 yards out straight to the bear. And if you look down, they're about 7-8 feet below you. Some pictures. Now, obviously the bears are there because they're trying to catch the salmon who are spawning or moving upstream to spawn. And I personally found the salmon as interesting, if not more so, than even the bears, to be honest. Like, the bears are really amazing, and the watch them fish is really cool, but it becomes repetitive after a while. But the fish themselves and the effort that they go through to go up the little waterfall is pretty remarkable. So I found them pretty wild. There's another bear fishing, some young bears sparring. He's fishing. He's waiting. Now, you see that Thomas Mingleson, I guess, or that's his name, the famous picture of the bear catching the fish. So when we were there, we got this bear who is a juvenile bear, and he's trying to figure out like why he's not catching fish. And frankly, it's because he's standing on a rock that's set back, right? Like, all he's got to do is come forward 4 feet, walk forward 5, and he would be like where this fish is. So our luck didn't draw the right opportunity here. The more adult bears weren't out on the day that we were out there, and he just kept missing left and right. It was actually pretty frustrating. Lots of fishing though, a lot of bears fishing. And I don't have a picture in here, but basically what they do is they catch them, they get to where they can like eat it comfortably, and they peel them like bananas and suck out all the roe and all the fatty bits. And then often they'll just leave we would consider a steak, right? A salmon steak. And then there's eagles flying around who will then come and pick the carcasses up after they've drifted downstream a bit and landed on shore. This is a bear that's actually out down the path, just sleeping out in the field or in the forest. And the thing that's really remarkable is that there's nothing stopping. Like, once you've left the platform, you go through a gate and you're on the path, and this bear is just off the path. So really remarkable access and opportunity, but also a little bit terrorizing. These next 3 bears are actually just bears on Cook Inlet. We went out flight seeing for bears again, and we had really bad weather, really low ceiling. And so I saw some dots like on the beach, and I said to the pilot, I'm like, what are those? He's like, bears. And he like literally aimed the plane straight down and landed on the beach and scared everybody. I was the only person who knew what was going on because I was the person who saw them. And he just like dive bombed this thing to the beach and landed. And so these bears were just, I don't know, 50 yards from us. He was walking towards us, this one. And when he came towards us, the guy just had us stand. There was 6 of us, and he had us stand in a row so that we looked like one unified wall. And he basically walked up to us, got within, 30 yards, and took a right, went around us. We all turned, watched him, and then he got back in line where he would have been going like straight through us, and then kept walking away. So not particularly dangerous, although if you were by yourself, you'd probably look more like a meal than a wall. Another really cool thing to see in Alaska is the Iditarod, which is called the Last Great Race, and it's about 1,000 miles, and it's a dog sledding race, and it's actually pretty tremendous to see. The dogs are, there's controversy around it because people don't think the dogs are happy, but these dogs run, and this is what they do. And I think you can see, like, by the looks on their faces, there's nobody tortured here. Everybody's having fun. They do have these little booty socks on so that the ice, when they're running, and the snow they don't cut the pads. Not all the dogs have them. It just kind of depends on the the musher and the dog itself, but you'll see them. So there's lots of little booties, and really, actually just a ton of fun to watch. In this particular scene, I was on a corner, so these guys are like coming straight at me, and then they like took a hard right, like kind of leaving me behind. But there was a minute when I shot this that I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be run over by these dogs. Both men and women participate, and the race can last, the shortest race is 8 days and some hours, but it tends to last between 8 days and just over 2 weeks, depending on the musher. So above the Arctic Circle, obviously another aspect is that Alaska does go above the Arctic Circle. Here's some flight seeing just into the mountains as you're about. This is some dog sledding that we did when we were there. So it's actually a ton of fun, although I will say that these animals have managed to figure out how to run at full speed and poop at the same time, which is sort of interesting. Some more mountains. And then what do you go up there for? But you go for auroras. So I have a whole different presentation on auroras, but they're really remarkable and literally breathtaking to see. And these are just some I have hundreds of shots, but this is a few of them, all taken up at Bettles or outside of Bettles, Alaska, which is at about 36 miles inside the Arctic Circle. So we're quite north here in these images. And just a quick video.
So Denise, we do have a question from Val Short, who's asking, what time of year was your trip?
So a lot of the stuff outside the auroras, that was all taken in the summer. So the June, July-ish. I have a quick question before I finish that thought. Can you see yourselves, or do you just see Iceland?
See Iceland.
Okay, thank you. Because I can see you guys, and I'm like, man, are you looking at yourselves? There's nothing useful about that for you. So anyway, so Jeff and I went, and we were there for like 3 weeks, and so our trip spanned late June to mid-July, and then my various trips to Katmai have always been around the 4th of July. So the bears start their activity late June, mid-July is really good. Then they sort of leave and they come back in September-ish timeframe. So it's kind of hard to predict, but July is the best time for the bears. In terms of wildflowers and all that stuff, it's a June, July thing, right? It's a little bit like even here in Montana where our spring happens much later. So you want to go later in the season. And then for the auroras, whether you go to see them, so I've seen them both in Fairbanks and oh my God, Jim, I just spaced the name of that place. And Bettles, and the one there's a place outside that we went and stayed in. I just have lost it in my head. Outside of Fairbanks. And that's all going to be, for my trips, they tend to be March. And then September up in Bettles can be good because it's not fully snowed in yet. So you do fly in, and then you might get reflections on the lake that's up there because it hasn't frozen over yet. However, with that, there's also a lot more bugs still up in that time of the September timeframe. There's a ton of mosquitoes still. But if you go after October, November, then it's frozen. You don't get the bug issue, but you also don't get the reflections because the river is covered, or excuse me, the lake is covered up. The reason we tend to go in March, late February to like March timeframe is because If you go like November, December, January, you're also more likely to have weather. And people have always said, like, well, should I go to Alaska or should I go to Iceland for auroras? And I will tell you, Alaska is actually a little bit more expensive, but I would say your ability to capture an aurora in Alaska is substantially greater than Iceland. And part of the reason is that Iceland being an island, it's very temperate. And so it never really gets super uber cold. And because of that, you get a lot of water vapor. So you're going to get clouds and you're going to get rain and you're going to get snow and you're going to get weather. When you go to Alaska and you get up in the area around Bettles and Barlow, you end up, it can be so cold. We have been out at -38. That's the coldest I've been out shooting. My favorite temperature is about -22. Because it's so cold, there's the water vapor is like just sucked out and the sky is clear and the air is clear and you're able to actually get great captures. Like if I were to go backwards, well, let's see. Yeah. That photo, I haven't had that many opportunities for a coronal display. So this is a downward display as opposed to across your vista. It's like literally coming out of the sky towards you. But you'll see all this like cloud. It wasn't cold. So we ended up with a lot of like just weather, just a lot of vapor in the air, and it destroys the photos for my 2 cents. Where you have super, super cold weather like this is probably in the -20s. You get a really clear sky and you're able to get stars and aurora and everything. You're more likely to get this moment in Alaska because it's landlocked and it gets so cold. So I don't know if that answered the question. If not, just add a question, re-ask a question. So our next stop in our journey around the 66th parallel is Iceland. And as I said before, it's an island. I have literally been to all the reaches. The only place I haven't been, I don't know if you see my mouse or not, but if you look at this as a clock, 10 o'clock is this sort of almost its own island. That's the West Fjords. Noon is where the red part of the flag comes up. And then at about, say, 1 to 2 is this sort of like duck-looking fjord. So probably the only fjord I have not gone out. I've driven the rest of the country, including through the center, in a couple different places where it says Iceland, and then also kind of from this bottom left at 7 o'clock up to noon, I've driven through that as well. So Iceland and I are very intimately attached. So some nuggets about Iceland. It's the world's 9th largest island country. It does sit at the confluence of the Arctic Ocean and the North Atlantic. And most of it sits between 63 and 68. And so it's why most people think of 66 North as a reference to Iceland, as well as to the Nordic ware called 66 North. It was settled by Vikings, and it became independent from Denmark in about I saw 2 different numbers, but I chose 1944. I think it started its separation in 41 and was fully independent by 44. The population is about 357,000, with 99% living in urban areas. So urban areas in Iceland would be Reykjavik, Selfoss, maybe, which is in the south, and then Akureyri, which is up in the north. And everything else is considered obviously non-urban. So very, very sparsely populated once you've left the metropolitan area, and 75% of that 357 is actually in and around Reykjavik. It's by far the most populated place, thinking about the way Anchorage is in terms of Alaska. 91% of all the people who live there are Icelandic. So really, from a demographic, from the demography of this country, most of the people there are going to be Icelandic. Very few foreign people live there. And it's about 40,000 square feet, with 97% of that mass actually being land, and not particularly lake driven. From a geology standpoint, it's super hyperactive, like it's got a lot of seismic and volcanic activity. Although I've never really felt an earthquake there, I probably wouldn't as a Californian. I probably wouldn't really feel that activity happening. But there's always some kind of seismic activity. And there's a ton of thermal energy. And there's some really good, there's different documentaries, and I can't think of the actor. This actor did a thing where they were going around the world. Zac Efron, I think is who it is. And he did one on the the geothermal power plants, and they expect to be energy independent by 2050, and meaning like off of any kind of fossil fuel, but being all geothermal. And it talks about like the technology that they have. So they heat their water, they heat their floors, and all of their households. All of their water comes from underground springs. So you've got on the one side this really amazing fresh cold water, and everything's heated by the volcanic activity below the island. So it's pretty remarkable. And it's obviously noted for long winters and short cold summers. Their summer season is basically mid-June to mid-August, and that's about it. This picture, although rubbishy because I stretched it out, shows the basic main road. There are obviously some other roads, but not very many. There's about 13,000 kilometers of main roads. Only less than a third, or about a third of them, I guess maybe just over a third, I guess, now I look at that, are actually paved, which is pretty remarkable. The average speed limit is, once you get out of town, you're going to see all these 90s, which about amounts to 56 miles per hour. And then, and that's the highest speed in the country. And then often you're going to be going, well, like in the 20s and 30s everywhere else. And this is called Route 1. So there are a lot of ways to get around Iceland. This is how we get around Iceland, to these, you know, ancient Land Rovers, literally this equivalent of driving a tank. So if you are in a car like this, then you have the ability to see many things. If you go and you do a larger buses or even the bigger bus tours, you're going to be only on the main ring road. This allows you to get off into the center of the country and see some the outback, basically, was how you'd look at it. And a lot of the thermal areas are out there, and you'll see that these have snorkels so that you can drive, because you're going to do river crossings. There might be a video of that in here, to get to these locations. So let's see some photos. We did do some ice caving. This is actually Uncle Charles. I know he's on the call, or he was on the call. And this is sort of our entrance into the ice cave. So we basically drove this particular one. We were able to luckily just drive kind of right up to it and go down this little tunnel. And then once you passed under this piece of the glacier, it opened up into a big cavern. But if you've never been in something like this, it's remarkable. I guess I could only equate it to something like snorkeling or scuba diving. I've never scubaed, but the feeling of being like under, even though it's ice and in that sense liquid, it's like being inside the earth. It's really remarkable. This is that cavern that I was just mentioning, so pretty interesting up close. This is our guide, Stefan. He's awesome. He still does this. So that's it for the ice caving. Dökusalan is the glacial lagoon. So everybody knows this place, and it's related to Diamond Beach, which I do have some photos of that, so you'll see it. But basically, this is a lagoon that sits at the bottom of the glacier. So what you're seeing here is the glacier, or at least part of it, coming down. It calves off into the lagoon, and then these icebergs will roll around in the lagoon for some period of time. And the next thing could be years, could be decades. They'll eventually break out, and they'll go through a small channel under a bridge that goes underneath that ring road out to the coast. And then depending on your currents, it'll hit the Atlantic Ocean and kick it back. The littler icebergs that have been sort of shined up get kicked back onto the beach, and that's Diamond Beach. So just a series of glacial activity. One of my favorite personal things about Iceland is that it's the sunsets in the winter. So my favorite time in Iceland is the dead of winter, actually. It is, even though you only have like 5 or 6 hours of daylight, it is a sunset that gives and gives and gives and gives. It's truly remarkable. And so you get these really beautiful colors, and they last all night. In this image, actually, we're out on a boat in the lagoon. And if you look way back at what would be like 9 o'clock on a clock, you'll see these 2 towers in the background. That's actually the bridge. So we're not actually even we're in front of the glacier, but not close to it, looking past here, and you'll see like how, kind of get a sense of how the distance is for these big bergs to make their way towards the ocean. More sunset. This is the channel. So again, the lagoon is out to 2 o'clock, 1 to 2 o'clock, and then this would be like 4 or 5 on the clock, 7 or 8 on the clock. where the bergs are coming into the river and about to make their way to the bridge, which is behind us. This is just an example. We did some light painting. This is bigger than a car. This is more like a F-150 size block of ice, and Don's in the back lighting it. Just an example of some night photography, but just ice scattered across the beaches and the waves. This is also taken, this is the moon. I love night photography here because the moonlight will make this stuff glow off the black sand. All right, so this is just from different areas around the country. Again, I've been so many places, it's going to be a little hard to, well, that was Vesterhorn. Sue has ever been there, that's what that is. This is, I could tell you, but it's not going to mean anything to you. More sunsets. Lots of old farms that are dilapidated, and you'll see some close-ups of the horses, but the Icelandic horses are like the supermodel of the horse world. This is called mossy. It's everywhere, and it's all of the rock below this is a volcanic rock that has spilled out and dried from eruptions over the years, and they also use this to make alcohol. Just rivers. A DC-3 that crash landed there. Also Vesterhorn. This was interesting because as we drove up to as we were driving, we saw this like brown, and it was weird because it was like, is there a fire? You know, you expected it to be something, but as you might see in all of these photos, there's no trees. And I have heard from, you know, different Icelandic people that part of the reason is that basically it was deforested to make boats for the Vikings. I don't know if that's entirely true, but it's probably somewhat true. So you don't see trees. So you're like, well, what on earth is creating this? How big is it? You know, if it's a fire, and everything where this cloud is left of that is ocean. So it just didn't make sense. So I started Googling, and it actually is, I looked up sandstorms, and in fact, it is a sandstorm. And it ended up, you can kind of get a sense of how high this is, but this is quite high, because that's a cliff, a fairly large cliff. And we drove through it for like 20 or 30 minutes. And we got very lucky because we didn't have any paint peel. But I had read an article from another photographer who said, you know, he didn't think anything of it. He could tell where the road was, and he drove through a sandstorm. And when he got to the hotel, all the paint was off the side of the car where the wind was coming. So we got super lucky because it ended up being an expense he had to incur, because they would prefer you to wait for the sandstorm to go away. This is at the bottom of Skogafoss. This is an abandoned ship out in the middle of nowhere. More sunsets. I'm telling you, winter sunsets in this country are just incredible. Some night photography. And you can see that there's a little bit of color change. Above the clouds, it's kind of green, and above that, there's a little bit of purple. I don't know if it's coming through for you, but we were on our way back, had not seen any auroras, and decided to keep driving. And when we got home, and I mean literally like back to the States, and we're going through photos, saw that there was color, which would have been an indication, because this was like 10 o'clock at night. Had we just hung out, we probably would have had a really good night for auroras. Some more moss. Back to the DC-10. This is now harder to get to. You used to be able to drive right to it. Now you have to walk like 3 or 4 miles to get to it. You can thank Justin Bieber for that. Guy closed the land. Because he was him going there and doing a video created a surge, and people were not maintaining the track. They were driving all over the place, and the owner did not want the land torn up any more than it needed to be, so he closed it. Also Vesterhorn, also Skogafoss. Just the glacier, our sunsets, and then we go to the highlands. That was all south and east. This is an example of a river crossing. Cannot tell you how much fun this is. They actually tell you to take it slow, but on these little rivers like that, we're like, nope. Absolutely so much fun. But this is why you have the snorkel, because otherwise you suck in water through the tailpipe and flood the engine. So the snorkel allows the air to come in from the top, so you can do this stuff. There are churches everywhere. Because it's so remote, people tend to build a church on their property of some sort, or in the like little village of 2 or 3 houses, they'll go and have a church. So known for their Icelandic wool, and this is one of the little characters that provide that. This is Burafoss, just a shot of it. This is another shot of it. It's absolutely spectacular. And again, things have changed. You used to be able to drive to where you could park and maybe walk, I don't know, 10 minutes to get to this. They have not, they've closed off the entire neighborhood. There's gates now. You have to live there to actually get the gate to open. Just too much tourism. So the people closed off the property. And the end result of that now is it's almost a 4-mile walk down, along the river to get to the scene. So we got very lucky. This is Dedifoss, well up into the north, towards the northeast. If you've ever seen Prometheus, from Aliens and Prometheus, this is the waterfall at the very beginning where the alien falls in. And there is nothing between me and the waterfall. So you're talking about, I don't know, 1 trillion gallons of water going over the edge. And my tripod foot is getting wet here. So it's, one thing I do like about Iceland is they are big believers in shit happens. And although they have blocked, they've got ropes up now, but it's mostly about protecting the natural environment. Whereas here in the States, we have barriers and gates and walls and, all of this stuff so you don't fall in. They figure if you're going to get close enough and you fall in, it's kind of your own problem. And I'm mad respect for that. This is Godafoss, also in the north. And if you look closely on the right at about 2 o'clock in this image, you'll see a person. And I used to spend a lot of time taking people or waiting for people to get out of my shots. But over time, I've actually, and you'll see other examples of this, I like them in there because they give perspective. If it wasn't for that person standing there, you'd have really no sense of the breadth of this waterfall. And it, translated, it's God Falls. It's well further north. Just another fall, starts with an H, don't remember the name. This is Krokjafell.
Yeah.
Tony Sweet calls this the witch's hat. Really neat location. And there's waterfalls, like 3 waterfalls just off to the back left here, bottom corner. This is Lagomar. It is out in the middle. So if you think back to where I said there was a shot in Alaska that would remind you of something, this area is very similar. You can see all the steam and smoke are from all the thermal activity that's happening. So this water is actually warm to the touch. And it's hard to see it, but there's like a person, you'll see a person down on the left. There's one guy in the middle with a red backpack. You go up the stairs, there's a dude up in the fog looking out. If you basically follow from the guy in the fog on the left, go towards 2 o'clock, you probably can't see it. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's a little black and blue thing here. When I took this shot, I had no idea that that was a person, but there's a person sitting there looking off to the right, and then there's some people in the back. So again, these people provide the scale of this. It's not small. It feels like it could be small, but it's actually just a ginormous landmass. This is the same area, just pulled backward, back towards the cars. And it reminds me of a Bev Doolittle painting, by the way. There could be Palomino horses out there someplace. More churches, more mountains, and our horses. So, oh, he didn't come out right, did he? His face is actually up there. But here you'll see just some of the horses. They're absolutely the most friendliest creatures in the world and super uber friendly. Now, one of the, I saw a post recently on Facebook where somebody was talking about driving around, and I want to say it was like Loudon, and they were feeding apples to the horses. And it took every ounce of strength not to say something, because honestly, apples are not really part of their diet. In Iceland, they do not. Like, people will go buy apples so they can bring the horses in to shoot them. The horses will come to you, and they don't need anything from you, or pull some grass up and like give them the grass that they're eating anyway. But the farmers are like, they'll actually they won't necessarily cause, but they can cause distress for the animals because it's not part of their diet. So it's one of those things that for me is stuck, and I don't know if that's true of a horse in Loudon or a horse in Assateague, but those horses eat everything, including plastic. So maybe that's different, but it would make me cautious to try to feed somebody else's farm animal anything that I didn't know about. Another video. I have no idea what this is going to be. Just saying. Hi. Uncle Charles. Sandstorm. One-way tunnels. Oops. All right. All right, we're moving on. Any questions before we leave Iceland?
Nothing in chat.
Okie dokie. All right, now we're going to travel to the top of the world. That's how I kind of looked at it. We're going to go to Greenland. So this is Greenland, their flag. We were over here, which is about 3 o'clock on the clock here, which is really a much more remote. Most of the population of Greenland lives on this western side. So a lot of tours go to the west side. A lot of the cruises go to the west side. Our tour and our time on our ship were within the Scoresby Sound, which is at 3 o'clock here. So just another map, just kind of show you where it is in perspective to everything else. You'll see Iceland off to the right and Alaska way up to the left. And you'll see that, you know, again, that's all in that same around 60, 66, 68 degrees. Inuttaqornit is the largest village on the East Coast. It frankly is damn right the only place on the East Coast that has a population. And it was founded in 1925 with a population of about 450. And the population of Inuttaqornit is actually continuing to diminish because obviously there is no draw to go there other than for tourism. There's not a lot going on, obviously the whaling, but living there is quite difficult. Greenland itself is a Danish territory. Most of the economy of Greenland comes from whaling and polar bear hunting, and then obviously tourism. And the average temperature is, 18 degrees. And most of Greenland is so 73 north. It's a little bit higher. This is the path that we took. So basically when you fly, you fly to Iceland and then you fly from Iceland to Constable Point, which is this point right here where it says airport. self-evident. And then you pick up your boat. Now, normally the trip goes from Constable Point to Interdecorment, which you can see is out here on the edge, but because of weather and a delayed start to our passage due to weather, we actually came out and then took a right, and we basically did the entire route in reverse and ended at Interdecorment before we went back to the airport. This is how you get there. This was our second plane. Our first plane, one of the engines turned off while we were going down the runway. This is the airport in Greenland. So you leave what would almost seem like a super sophisticated airport to land here. And pretty much this is it, with about 2 outhouses. You can see one in the picture. That is our boat, the Opal. We spent the week on that, 12 people plus the four crew, well, 3 crew and a chef. And that's it, that's everybody. We rented the whole boat, so it was really nice to have it just for us, and everything revolved around our desires as photographers and our goals. Instead of having like a mixed up boat where you might have some hikers where you might be the only photographer on a boat of hikers and you're going to spend a bunch of time on land, which is not how we handled that. But the Opal is really beautiful, and it is a hybrid. So it does have a diesel engine. However, they only run the diesel engine during the day, like while we might be out on the Zodiacs, the engine will be running. And then the rest of the time we're underway, it's actually on battery powered, and it's basically like a Tesla, except for it has 16 batteries. So it's super silent, which is one of my favorite things about sailing, is the silence of it when the sails go up. But obviously, to stay on some kind of schedule, you can't sail the entire trip because you're too beholden to weather. So we do a lot of motoring, but the beauty of it is it's silent motoring. So you're not just being pounded by the sound of a diesel engine knocking the whole time, and you're also not getting the smells of the diesel fumes. I'm not even sure that I was ever aware of the diesel engine running in our trip because of the way they manage the timeline. Now, when you fly in, you have to like walk to where you can actually get into the Zodiac. So you'll see the Zodiac here at mid-ground. The rifle that is sitting here is because when you're on land, you have to have a rifle. Somebody has to have a rifle. And so Don carried the rifle for us, as well as one of the crew that we were always with crew when we were on land. So there's always 2 rifles present. And it isn't so much polar bears, you'd be thinking your first guess, but it's actually the muskox that do not like people. And if they felt compelled, they will charge you and kill you. So the rifles are there just as a protection against running into muskox, really. And you'll see the boat here in the background. So basically, they take a couple of trips. You put all your gear and a bunch of people into this boat. You go out, get on, and they do a few trips to come and get you. And then that's it. You're sailing the rest of the time. Now, the company that we go with sail under 2 flags. We sailed under the Icelandic flag, which meant our crew, and particularly our captain, they were all Icelandic. They also fly under the Danish flag out of Greenland, and that is called the Dana Wood. It's only a diesel engine boat, and you'll see this one section in a photo in a little bit where we have all our camera gear. The difference in the Dana Wood is that we ate downstairs, whereas in the Dana Wood, they eat upstairs in a room. So oddly enough, whenever we saw the Dana Wood out on the water, we never saw people outside because they could sit inside and see the view. Our group never chose to be inside. We were always out on the deck hanging out and appreciating like the scenery. And yeah, it was a little bit chillier, but honestly, I think it was breathtaking. So anyway, so we flew under Icelandic flag. This is what a stateroom, air quotes, looks like. Generally 2 beds, bunk beds basically, and don't be fooled by this. There's nothing else in this room. There's like probably 2 feet to the right when you walk in the door, and that's it. The rooms are very small, but the beauty is the engine and not hearing it. The ship itself is really stunning just to photograph on its own. They maintain the boats beautifully, and I just found the boats fascinating. This is Captain Aki. So he's like the main dude. He piloted the boat most of the time. This is Husky, Huskodor, and man, cute as pie. And he did most of our touring. and this is Katrin. She is also super cute. So whereas all the girls lusted after Husky, all the boys lusted after Catherine. And then this is Chef Leo. He is a chef, and I think he lives in like Sweden or something like that. He was only on for the year, so we got super lucky because he owns restaurants. So we have like first class food all the time. I know that they always have a good chef, but he's a professional chef in his day-to-day life who was looking to get out and see the world. So he offered to be the chef on the boat, and he and Jeff had a bromance. So this is just some of the kind of scenery that we saw from the ship, or from the boat, I guess rather. She's a schooner, so three-masted schooner, two-masted schooner. So just some icebergs. This was like the first thing we saw as we were coming out from the airport, out to the main Scoresby Sound channel, was this beautiful iceberg with a hole in it. This is where I was talking about, like, all the time, our gear just sat here. We would close up the bags, but they stayed out all the time. We never had weather to worry about. And we congregated around this area. Now, the cool thing about our boat is because of the way it's situated, we could walk around it and get to the other side of the ship really easily and always have sight lines to what was going on the other side of the boat. Whereas in the Donna Wood, this is a big building that sits on top of the deck. So it's much harder to like see what are you missing? Like if you're looking out to one side, what are you missing on the other side? You couldn't really tell, where we had the access and full vista. We got very lucky and saw polar bears. We actually saw 3 polar bears. This was a juvenile, and I think we were guessing probably his mother, who were taking turns feeding off a seal that they had captured. So this particular photo actually is Jeff, just call that out. This is what the feeding looked like. So you can see his lovely white fur completely covered in carnage, and the carnage. So he was right off the shore. We pulled up pretty close. They paid us no mind. They went about their business. Another polar bear. Now, we got super lucky. They do see polar bears pretty much every year, but we were at the end of the season, which we were like mid-August on this ship, on this trip. And they had not seen any polar bear up until these polar bears. So it was a pretty valuable sighting even for the crew. And this is kind of what life was like on the boat. You'll see a picture in a second of what they're taking a picture of. But this is a 100% boat-based tour, although we did take the Zodiacs out and land on land and hike, which you'll see also in a minute. But we cover a lot of ground, or rather water. And so most of everything that you're going to see is from the boat. And they're taking a picture of these basalt columns that were quite beautiful. Just amazing imagery of these icebergs as you're passing through the sound. And you'll see that they have a feeling of being almost like a smooth meringue or a marshmallow, waxy almost. It's really remarkable. And these are thousands and thousands of years old, calving off and floating. And they end up in an area that they call the iceberg graveyard, where you start to see a dense population. And some of these are all kind of mixed up. Part of these are from that area. And this is taken off of a Zodiac with the camera really low to the water. If you were to have a camera housing for snorkeling or scuba diving, you would be able to actually, set that in there and get the base of the iceberg. And so I think they said that 90% of the iceberg is below the water. So when you think about how big these are, and some of these icebergs are like the size of New York City blocks, literally, 10 stories high and as big of a footprint as a city block, imagining what's underneath is really remarkable. Just some landscapes and clouds. We got all kinds of cool atmosphere and weather, pretty much from the point that you were up in the morning. There wasn't a sight that wasn't tremendous. It's a big pano, obviously, but 25 or 30 photos here. Again, similar to the Icelandic landscape, again, similar like the Alaskan landscape. The mountains all kind of look the same. I find it really remarkable and pretty tremendous how beautiful the landscape is in this part of the world. This husky driving away is just kind of look back at the boat. It's probably one of the most beautiful ships ever. Obviously, we're on land for this, and although it might be hard to see, there is a person right there, this little being. She had walked off. You'll see a camera bag right here, but it gives you just a sense of scale. You know, this person's 5.5 feet tall, and when you kind of put her in the landscape, and with the iceberg in the background, it really gives some perspective to the size and mass of this these chunks that are passing through. Very moon-like. Now the neat thing is this. So you see where the sun is. If you come down to like 5 o'clock, a little pointy mountain, and then this iceberg that's sitting there. In that iceberg, there's a hole. So we had not seen, other than that very first iceberg, we had not seen any bergs with big openings in them. And so when we saw this on our hike, when we got back to the boat, we told the captain, we're like, this is where we were on this little island that we were on, and we saw an iceberg with a hole in it. Can we go shoot that? Because we really wanted to get a picture of the schooner in the hole, or, you know, shot through the hole. And Aki was like the greatest guy ever. Because, you know, obviously he's got a schedule to keep too, but he's like, man, let's go. And so he scoped it out on his radar to figure, like, well, if I'm looking at this land mass, how do I get around? And we went, you know, kind of all the way around the land mass to come back in to be able to get up close to this little iceberg. And by the way, it looks super small, but do you see it? It's quite huge. Again, August, so this is still spring for them. So we did see a lot of wildflowers. This is another hike. Everybody in this back corner, it's a kind of the clump of 4 people in the back, they'd hiked up and found a musk ox skeleton. And interestingly enough, they also found a knife. So clearly somebody was like breaking it down and skinning it and taking the meat, and they left the knife behind. So it's pretty freshly killed, I believe. I actually stayed on the boat for this. So I was taking pictures of these guys from the boat. Icebergs. And anybody, does that a question out there? I know there were 3 comments. Is there something out there that we need to address, Joe?
No, that somebody was commenting that there was a cable release in one of the photos, but still thought it was pretty good.
Cable release. All right, people, cable release where? All right, somebody's going to tell me which photo that's in. I wasn't sure which one. I think people are crazy. I'd have cloned that out. People know me well enough. Okay, so anyway, there's an area there where the rock is really red, and heard tell that it is the same land formation as Ayers Rock in Australia. So thinking about, you know, 20 million years ago or whatever, the way the land was connected and separated over time, and things floated to where they floated to. From a geological standpoint, the red rock is the same as the red rock in Australia. Just, you know, more icebergs. This is some of the icebergs in the iceberg graveyard. Just remarkable, and it is really hard to tell. So you've got a couple photos coming up here in a minute that'll give you a sense of scale, but this is like if you were to sail a boat up to this, the boat mass wouldn't even come to this little edge on the ledge here on the left. It wouldn't even come up that high. That's how big these are. It's tremendous. And you can't really see it here. You'll see it in a second, but there's a really dark blue or shinier blue instead of white line through this berg. Here's an example of it. And that is compressed ice. So over time, the weight of the glacier pressing down on itself compresses it, and it's almost like creating a diamond, only it's creating clear ice. And so you can see it here on the right-hand side. Really beautiful to see these blue lines through the icebergs themselves. You also get a lot of waterfalls, which is what you see here on the left and in this image here. So this is just glacial melt from coming off the iceberg, just sitting out in the sun all day, creating these waterfalls. And just tremendously beautiful sort of scenery, different shapes. You got to get a bit of sense of the size of these things, and things are just massive. some drone shots. So we flew the drone off the ship, which is a little bit of a challenge, but try not to get it in the rigging. But you also get, these are nice because you get a sense of the mass of ice that goes below the water as well. In this particular image, if you look off this top chute here, you'll see a zodiac. So again, leaving that little bit of kind of something we understand the scale of in the image will help give you the size of what you're looking at. So that's one there. Some more drone. In this particular case, this is a channel, and you'll see all the icebergs going down, and in the background, you'll see two ships. It was one of the few times that we actually caught up or spent any time near the Donna Wood. Even though they always have two boats in the water at the same time, they do that in case of a problem. They try to stay close enough so that they can, if there's an emergency, they can, you know, be there for each other. And yet they work very hard at never being in the same place, so that you're not always getting another boat in your shot. You really do feel the remoteness of being out there. There's no Wi-Fi. The boat does generate its own electricity. So we could do our computers and stuff like that. People use their phones to take, play games and take photos. But from contact with the outside world, the captain has a sat phone and he has his ship to shore radio. But otherwise, there's no connection. Once you're out there, you are on your own. Just tremendous winter light. The evening light in that part of the world is amazing. So here's that iceberg that I said that we spotted on our hike and then came back and had him take the boat out to. So this is taken from a Zodiac, and he parked on the other side, so we were able to shoot, and then he would switch off so that the other group, we'd only put 6 in a boat at a time. They'd drop us off on the boat, and the other guys would come out so they could shoot the scene. But this is a pretty sought after photo opportunity on these tours, although all the icebergs are always different. So you see different versions of it. This is up towards the edge of the glacier. And if you look in the very, very foreground, you'll see like a seagull who actually looks pretty good sized. And then you see the Zodiac, and then you see the wall of the glacier. So it is, again, just an opportunity to get a sense of scale. Absolutely shocking how big this stuff is. They've pulled up, this is a really dark compressed piece of that, like ice that's been compressed, although it's not blue. There's a lot of rock and sediment in this particular piece that they're floating up against. I am not quite in the bird's nest. The platform you see above me is the bird's nest. The move to get up there was enough to give me an ass cramp, to be honest. And so I stopped on this mast, or in this, whatever the hell it's called that goes across. It's like a sail arm, really, and decided I was comfortable and I would shoot from there. And many of us went up here. So if you wanted to, they would teach you how to climb the rigging and make sure that you were safe, like how to secure yourself. And then they would send you up. And once you've done it once, you could do it as many times as you want because you've been trained. This is what it looks like from my point of view down the mast. Pretty remarkable. Even looking at this today, I was like, whoo, that still gives me heebie-jeebies to look down. You are pretty high up there. So that was with my foot, not with my foot. You're ways up this mast. And then obviously the view from up here is beautiful, and you're able to see down into the glacier, a little bit like the drone shots where you can see more of the underwater stuff. When we were on the ship, we went on, we were delivering some supplies to make like these huts. So you see this little hut to the right. We were delivering some supplies to a research village. They were studying the narwhal, which is the unicorn whales, what people call them. So it's the whale with the horn. And there were people from like Finland or Sweden or something like that, who are part of that crew doing the research. And then there are people that live in the village full time, maybe like 20 people, a few adults and some kids. So here is just some kids, this taken from the boat, and they're playing with the telescope and everything. But really interesting group. We were dropping off a hut, and in return, because we were doing, the crew did them this favor. They said, hey, let's go out and catch a muskox, and we'll split the meat with you. And so our chef and Husky, the first officer, the first mate, they got off the boat, jumped in a truck, and they went out and then got to where they figured that muskox was, and then hiked. And they spent all day hiking, shot a muskox, brought it back, actually broke it down in the field. Leo broke it down and brought all the meat back, and then we split the meat with the villager. And also, as a thank you, the research team shared with us, they made a salad. And it's pretty remarkable because, you know, obviously perishable food in this part of the world is hard to come by. And they basically shared, you know, 2 weeks worth of their rations with us. And so they got muskox and they came on board, and we basically had a party and had some alcohol and listened to music and chatted, knowing that they weren't going to get like re-upped on their supplies for a couple of weeks. So really amazingly generous people all the way around. This is a photo. Now we're back on the ship, and Leo is starting to break down the muskox meat for us and for them. We gave some to the Donna Wood, we gave some back to the village, and then we kept some for ourselves. And you can see, you know, if Jeff had pearls, he'd be clutching them. And then Schwager here in the scene. Jeff was completely and thoroughly grossed out by the fact this was a freshly dead animal. And there is some more of it as well. But it all ended up getting wrapped and packaged and put in coolers. So the thing that it's sitting on are the ice chests with all the food for the trip. If you look at this close enough, you'll see Husky down on the ground. So you see the Zodiac and the bottom foreground. And then right through the rigging, you'll see Husky. And he's basically standing there with this gigantic hose, collecting and refilling our fresh water tanks so that we would have shower water and cooking water and drinking water coming right out of this natural spring, out of this river, or runoff, probably actually runoff from a glacier that's further up. Pretty remarkable, the fresh water. Like, I would never drink water from a stream anywhere in the United States for money. You couldn't make me. It's just not clean. So this is Katrin. She is fishing for our drink ice. So, you know, there's no real like freezer on board the ship. There's, you know, refrigerators. It's definitely cold out, but you're not going to make bricks of ice. They basically fish out an iceberg. So here is a video of her trying to lasso this. So she's laying on the deck, like half out of this boat, trying to capture our drink ice, which was finally a success. So basically, you would come up here, and there was a hammer that was sitting on this little area, and you like smack off your, you know, chunk of ice for your drink and move on. Some more photos. You know, and I saw this today, and I'm like, why the hell didn't we go take pictures there? But I think we were on our way to enter Tacormit, and just weren't in a good place to stop. You can tell it's like long light. The sun's well off to the side, and we were running out of daylight at this point, so we didn't stop at this one. But this is a perfect example of where you'd want to get up under, not under. So the other thing is they won't put the ship in danger. So even though that other photo looks like they're kind of in it, they're well behind it. And these, we saw this happen throughout the trip. These things break, they turn, they collapse on themselves. You will see some other images where boats really look like they're underneath it, and it's people just being really not safe. And I'm thankful that the crew that we had didn't play games, so that they would do their best to get you exactly what you wanted, but they were going to do it within reason and not put lives at jeopardy for it, which I have mad respect for. So that's probably one of my favorite. It's just monolithic in its shape and size. Now this little village, this is the village at Innertkormet, so we're kind of coming to the end of the trip, and it is so beautiful. All of the little ticky-tacky dwellings, these are all houses, or you know, some of them are drying stations and, you know, businesses and stuff like that, but they're all a different color, and the town is so cute when you're pulling up to it. So this boat in this shot is actually the Donna Wood. So if you look at the, between the masts of this, you'll see that there's like a white wall, and you can see my point. Like for this particular boat, you had to walk around that white building that sat on the deck. Whereas ours, there was a small like opening. So you had light down in the dining area, in the room area, but it was very small. So you could get from one side of the boat pretty quickly and see what was going on either side. Whereas the Donna Wood, you just didn't have that same ability. And 9 times out of 10, everybody was sitting inside looking out the window. And I guess that's okay. It's not my gig. Like, I much prefer the way we did this and being outside and sharing the hammock and hanging out up on the rigging. You could actually go out over the floor mast and hang out over the water if you wanted to while we were in motion. You know, we had a lot of freedom on our boat. So this is our boat, sails up. We did do some sailing, and then while we were sailing, half of the group would go out on the Zodiac and be able to take pictures, because the ship itself is so incredible when all of the rigging is up. So we would switch off the roll. Final lights. And I believe that is our last thing. So that's it. Just spent your time at 66 North. I hope you had fun and enjoyed it and are inspired to travel if we ever get to travel again. Get out and see the world. Any questions, comments?
Fantastic.
Oh, I get it now, Jean. There wasn't a thank you, whoever said fantastic. Jean lost a cable release. That wasn't actually in the photo. I was like, no, there isn't.
Beautiful photos, Denise.
Thank you. It's it may be hard to take a bad photo there, to be honest. It's pretty. Any of those places are really tremendous.
Yeah, gorgeous places.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Far away, you know, Iceland is obviously pretty easy to get to for you guys. For us now, it's not quite as easy as it used to be, but 5-hour flight. Alaska's actually even harder to get to for you guys. And Greenland is, yeah, it's just a challenge. Got to put your mind to it.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful.
Anybody sound like someone was about to ask something? I don't want to cut you off there. Okie dokie. I did that pretty fast. Kind of surprised.
Denise, someone's asking about what your plans are for 2021.
Oh, hey, yeah, thank you. I didn't notice that. So, you know, we're in a bit of a quandary. We have Alaska, so not Alaska, sorry, another A word, Africa. Let me see, what do I have on my website? It's been a while. So the long and short of it is that we do have a schedule up. So we have, we had Costa Rica, but that was going to be in March of this year, a coming year, 2021, and just too soon. So we've pushed that off to 2022. We do have a trip going to South Africa, and we still do have spots available for the April version of that. The April trip, we're going to be there in April and May at Zamanga, which is a really incredible place, but we're still up in the air here. Let me do this, sorry. Just go back and share my screen again. So this is Zamanga, and it is pretty incredible access to some of these animals and the photography, because they've got a lot of hides, and you also do game drives and stuff like that. The only problem with Africa in general is, like, right now it's April, May, and because of COVID, it's really hard to say. Like, so we still have a plan to go. We're still optimistic about going. It may get pushed again. I have no way to know right now. And then also, our plan was to go to Patagonia again. And that's more of a fall thing. So it's still up in the air. We haven't started to pull it together, but this is some imagery from the Patagonia trip. And the short and long of it, or long and short of it, is that at this point we have still some plans, but it may be that things get pushed. And so I would say check the website. So here you'll see that we've kind of done Costa Rica again, and we just haven't set a date yet. But we have some designs, you know, like we wanted to do Palouse again. We want to do Glacier. We want to do Banff. So there's all kinds of things that we're scheming about. I have Cuba in the works. It was also supposed to be next year, but we'll likely push to early, because those things are early, like February, March timeframe, and we're just not going to be someplace where we're going to, whether there's a vaccination for it or not. Right now, nobody wants Americans on their land, so it's twofold, right? One is the COVID thing, but there's also the side effect of, you know, people don't want people coming in from the United States right now, so we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Don't know if that's going to change in January with the administration change or not. So it's up in the air. But those are the places we're sort of looking at. So finishing off, like I said, Patagonia, Cuba, Costa Rica, Palouse. There's some things. And I actually have the boat again held for me. I was supposed to be in Greenland in 2021, and I've pushed that off to August of 2022. So we have the boat again. So I'd say just gotta look at the website, to be honest. I can't commit. So anybody else? Okay, if you guys don't have any questions, and Sam, you ain't got nothing, we can wrap it up and call it a night.
Is Sam on mute?
I think we lost
Sorry,
Yeah,
I was on
she
mute.
might be. That's it.
Yeah, I was on mute.